Um, so what we're going to be talking about today is the typical week portion of the annual survey. So what we were thinking was that the reports that we developed a few years ago for the annual survey have been such a big hit, and we've come up with an idea for how we could possibly do the same thing for the typical week portion of the annual survey. So I'm going to share my screen here. So the way that we're doing this is we're going to be using a feature in workflows that some of you may or may not be familiar with is ephemerals. Ephemerals are a type of item in workflows that can be used for tracking interactions with the library that aren't necessarily circulation statistics. So what I've done here is I've pulled up one of our JASI member libraries. They have quite a few ephemerals set up. So this is not specific to typical week yet. This is just explaining the concept of ephemerals. Because we're going to be making use of ephemerals to do our typical week tracking. So ephemerals, they're special tags that we set up. So how that works is this library has these items that they wanted to track. They wanted to track their adult learning program, after school, business. All of these are call numbers that they've set up, or that they've said that they want to track. What we require to set that up is they would set aside these barcode labels that they already have. They'd set those aside and stick those onto a blank sheet of paper. And next to each one of those, they're going to write, so they would have written adult learning next to this one, after school next to this one, for all of the interactions that they want to track. And then they would keep that sheet next to their circulation desk. And if they have more than one circulation desk, you can just make copies of it. You would have that there. And you would also have a dummy patron card as well, because the ephemeral wizard requires a user to be scanned in, and some of your interactions might not involve a user. Like if you wanted to track, say, like the number of print jobs or number of faxes or things like that that you're performing. So you would have these item tags on your sheet and on also your dummy patron card, and then you can use the ephemeral wizard, which I'll show here in a moment, to go, okay, we've had this many transactions for this type. So the ephemeral wizard, it looks very much like the checkout wizard. So you're scanning in a user ID, an item ID. It also has this number here for number of copies. So this can be used for if you were scanning in, for example, if your ephemeral was to track how many people were attending this particular program, you would keep track of how many people were in the program, and then you can come in here and just scan, say if you had 20 attendees, then you'd scan in your dummy barcode there and then your item barcode. And then you would only have to scan it once instead of having to scan it 20 times for each attendee. And then once that's checked out, that shows up down here. So that's the concept behind ephemerals. You can use it to track anything that you can imagine. The application of that in the typical week is similar to, so I'll pull up our reports here. So we have these annual survey reports. These are the reports that we've set up that are specifically numbered to the fields that they answer in the annual survey. So you would run this report to answer field A1.14, C0.1, so on and so forth. We've done the same thing with the ephemeral tags that are going to be specific to the typical week. We've come up with this naming convention. So you can ignore this first one. Cochrane was one of our libraries that volunteered to sample this for us. So their seed library, that's an ephemeral they were already using, so we can ignore that. All these other ones that start with TW, TW stands for typical week. That's just a way for us to signal, like for consistency's sake, for everybody that we're going to be doing this for. So TW for typical week, and then G1.3.1, that's the field in the typical week portion of the annual survey that this answers. And same thing for all of these. So the setup is very similar. You would send us you'd set aside these barcodes that you have, and then you'd tell us, oh, I want this one to track, these reference transactions. I want this one to track tech social media support. You would tell us which ones get assigned to which one. We will set up the tags for you, and then we'll say, okay, you're ready to go use these. And you would use these with the ephemeral wizard the same as you would a regular ephemeral. You don't have to be using ephemerals already to do this. We've got some documentation here in our libguide. So this explains a lot of what I've just gone through. So the setup is you would send us the items. You would have to pick out the items that you want to pick. These are the items that we went through the typical week portion of the annual survey, and we picked these fields out as we could use JASI to track this stuff. So this is the long form of what they're asking for, and then I've shortened these in these call number tags. And then from that, once your ephemerals are set up and your dummy patron is set up, you can run your typical week on the week of your choosing. And then we would also set up a report specific, like if you already have ephemerals, this would be a separate typical week report. And if you're not using ephemerals, this would just be its own report, and you would just let us know when you want it run, or if you've had your Blue Cloud Analytics demonstration and you've got your credentials, I can make that available and you can run it yourself to see what that report would look like, and then you could answer your own questions, or like I said, you could ask us to run the report for you. I haven't made this available in the Blue Cloud Analytics demo reports yet because we're still just introducing this concept. But it could very easily, if you've had your demo for a while now and you're comfortable with that, I can make that report available on request. That's no problem either. So that's kind of the thinking behind it. This whole typical week tracking. If you're already tracking typical week in your own way, we're not making this a requirement for anybody. This was just a way for us to think like, oh, like the way we've named these annual survey reports seems to really work well, and it's cut down on the number of tickets that we get. Not that we were ever swamped or anything like that, but it just seems to have helped everybody out. And we were thinking this could also be used in the same way. So having some sort of standardized tags to try and help that along, so that you can just look at that and go, typical week, okay, we're just tracking that during when we're doing our typical week, and then you don't track it the rest of the year. Or if you want to track it the rest of the year, you could, but you would know what these tags are for because of the naming convention that we've given them all. So that's pretty much the extent of it. This documentation just explained, like I've got a screenshot of what I had just up there in workflows. And yeah, I had described the process for the report that we're going to set up for everybody. So as I said, this is all completely voluntary. You don't have to do this. This is just our idea for what we thought would work best for everybody.